It's October, so you know what that means. I review games that are supposed to be spooky, scary, scream out loud kind of fun. So let's start the month off with the second sequel to one of my favorite shooters of all time, Fear. The original Fear was fantastic. It had an engaging story about an abused little girl with psychic abilities, along with some of the most satisfying gunplay for the time. Seriously, this game is almost a required play if you were a fan of FPS games in general. And, quick plug for my top 10 personal favorite FPS games of all time video, because why not? Anyway, Fear 2 was kinda disappointing to me, as it really lacked the creativity the first game had. It wasn't a terrible game by any means, but the story just didn't hold the same weight, and the gunfights were mediocre. Add in the, messed up ending, and it just didn't sit the same way with me. But then Fear 3 was released, and I played it pretty much right away, but something felt off immediately. Maybe it's because it was done by different developers, as the first two games were created by Monolith, and the third game was done by some company called Day One Studios. Not a good start. But at least the story once again revolves around Alma's two sons, the evil commander named Paxton Fettel, and the Point Man, who for some reason still doesn't have an actual name. And why was Paxton Fettel called this instead of Paxton Wade? I get it, they were genetically modified and created using science and all, but still. Anywho, I should elaborate that Paxton is a ghost at this point, since you did kinda put a bullet in his brain in the original game. Alma is also involved once again, but this time, she's pregnant, after that aforementioned shocking ending to the second game. Due to her going into labor, her screams of agony are ripping apart the fabric of reality, tearing apart the city that you're currently located in. Unexplainably, Point Man is being held by Armacham thugs. Paxton arrives, possesses one of the two guards, which distracts the other, allowing Point Man to do violent things to him. Now Point Man's task is clear: find Alma and stop her from giving birth. Paxton, on the other hand, has other ideas: find Mommy and help her in any way his ghostly form can. So yeah, right from the start, you have two different characters you can choose from. Both of them play slightly different from each other. Point Man is your typical action hero, wielding procured firearms to take down any threats. Paxton is mostly the same, but since he's a spirit, he can't just pick up any guns and use them. Instead, he must take control of an unwilling enemy and use that body to cause harm to others. These bodies can only take the possession for so long before the body explodes, but this can be prolonged by picking up red orbs that enemies drop when killed. I'll be honest, I only played a little bit of Paxton, as this form of gameplay just didn't click with me, but it works well enough. Point Man, on the other hand, just goes out guns blazing. There's a heavier reliance on using cover in gunfights, since any damage you accumulate will be healed in time in typical FPS fashion. The cover mechanics are solid enough. By pressing a key, you'll duck behind something, and holding the right mouse button, you'll peek around the borders to take pot shots at your enemies. No, cover is not required. In fact, in later stages, you'll probably be perfectly fine if you just unleash your inner Rambo and start firing at enemies while in plain sight. But there are some rooms where cover is your only friend to avoid a quick death. The weapons you find are definitely improved over Fear 2. In fact, some of them even feel like direct upgrades to the original game. The G3A3 rifle, the remodel of my favorite G2A2, fires less rounds, but fires in burst patterns and can absolutely punish anyone gunning for you, popping heads with no resistance. The weapon that fires steel rods seems to pack more punch as well, easily pinning enemies to walls. The shotgun still isn't quite as good, but you can yet again explode enemies into a bloody mess with close-range shots, so it's still super satisfying to use. And yes, the gore has been increased back to applicable levels in Fear 3. Explosions will spray crimson, and bullets that decapitate enemies will spray blood around as the enemy slowly sinks to the ground. Add in the slow motion that has been a selling point since the start, and gunplay is fun again. What doesn't carry over is the horror. Fear 1 is one of the few games that made me jump a few times while playing it, but like Fear 2, Fear 3 just doesn't have that threat. Sure, there are some areas that look creepy enough, but there's definitely more emphasis on the action than the scares. There are minimal monsters to encounter, with the main threat just being Armacham soldiers, complete with goons that phase in and out of walls to try to sneak up on you. Sometimes you'll run into some sort of creature, but these are kinda rare, and when they do show up, they're kind of underwhelming. I really do miss the invisible creatures from the first game, where they just randomly show up when you least expect it, slash at you, and run away, as you are shooting blindly with dust and glass being blown everywhere. Man, that first game was so damn good. That's not to say that this game doesn't try to scare you. Occasionally, some large beast will show up, pick you up, and scream at you as you fall down and put a hand to your head for some reason. It doesn't kill you, and you do eventually find out what the creature is at the end of the game, but it's kind of a lackluster enemy that I feel could have been used a bit more creatively. At least the story is interesting enough with you trying to find Alma. Granted, you'll hear her screams during her contractions, but they don't exactly sound like screams of pain. Instead, they sound like she's screaming in terror. Either way, this causes areas to start to crumble, and there's an area of the game where you have to navigate a road while it begins breaking apart. If you don't know where to go, this can be kind of frustrating, as the first time I've played this game, I got pretty angry, as it was easy to fall in for the instant death. But this is really the only thing you'll see that's being altered by Alma. Again, it's a missed opportunity. Some of the earlier stages are pretty fun to run around in, but the later ones all feel kinda bland. You start out in a prison facility of some sort, after which there's a romp through the neighborhood and backyards. You then trek through an abandoned store, complete with decaying shelves and a group of crazed humanoids that try to kamikaze themselves into you. This might actually be the scariest part of the game, and that's only because these crazies stalk you a bit before you actually encounter them. It's definitely the best part of the game, so it's a shame that later stages are just mediocre journeys through buildings and roads to get to Alma. The game is also fairly short. There are only about 8 stages, with each taking about 20 to 30 minutes to complete, totaling roughly 4 hours. Sure, you can argue that by playing the game through once as both characters you can double that, but to me, that's cheating. Each character does have the potential to have a different ending, so there is actually reasons to play through with both of them. As you're playing the game, you'll be completing challenges, which level up your profile up to a maximum level of 21. Each level up gets you additional perks, like longer lasting slow motion, more health, increased maximum grenades, and so on. The challenges themselves range from getting kills with each weapon, finding bodies that are glowing to absorb their psychic essence, locating Alma dolls, spending lengthy times behind cover, and getting slow-mo kills. None of the challenges are particularly difficult to get, and if you miss them, no big deal. But as you do complete them, you'll be earning points. At the end of the game, when you reach Alma, your point totals will be tallied, and if you have the most points, that character's ending will be shown. This mostly comes into effect if you are playing co-op. If this is the case, when you and your partner reach Alma, your point totals are compared, and whoever has more is considered the favorite son, with that character's ending being shown. It's an interesting system for sure. However, if you're playing alone, then once you hit that max level of 21, then there really isn't any additional reason to really complete these challenges. The character you are using will automatically earn that ending. And that's Fear 3. I'd say it's an improvement over Fear 2, but it still can't match up to the original. Maybe it's the reliance on heavy action set pieces, but it still doesn't feel like a proper sequel to the series. It's just missing something. Either way, if you have a friend to play with, it's still a solid game. I just wish I could play a Fear game that really lives up to the first. Maybe if a Fear 4 is ever released, it will satisfy me, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. Although, one can hope, I suppose. Final score? 5 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.